Meher Baba, and I consider myself, Meher Baba was considered what you would call a universal guru, right? He's not of one religion, he's of all religions and no religions, you know. And for me too, when people ask me, I just universal. If they ask me I'm Christian or Buddhist or whatever, I'm universal. I don't consider myself of one religion. I'm like of all religions and no religion. So you have to make effort, but then you have to surrender to grace and let go.
Welcome to this new episode, and today I am here with Thomas. How are you, Thomas?
Very good, and yourself?
Very good, thank you very much. So today we're going to talk about a path in yoga, which is called Bhakti Yoga, and the role of the guru as well. So that's very interesting for me. Thomas, first of all, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your life.
I was born in New York City, but raised in New Jersey. I haven't lived in that area for over 30 years. And then I lived in a number of different areas around the US and also did a lot of different types of professions. My major in university was economic and psychology. So I did do a lot of things connected with that. And then before moving to Thailand about, it's been 13 years now ago, I was living in California and Hawaii, basically, those two places. So, and it's kind of a long story about how I ended up in Thailand, but here I am.
And you're a professional athlete as well, is that right? Or...
Well, I was really just an amateur athlete, amateur wrestler for 13 years from the age of 12. Well, I guess it was, 13 years. It would have been about age 11 till about 24. But back then, there was no real professional wrestling, just the fake stuff.
Okay.
Because at the time I graduated from high school, I was rated and considered the #1 wrestler for my age and weight in the country.
Wow,
so
that's awesome, eh?
So I was recruited by all these different universities and everything, got a scholarship. It feels like a past life now, of course, a long time ago. Yeah.
And okay, tell us, when did you discover the spiritual path and what happened?
First, I'd like to get clear about what, for me, I mean by a guru, because that can mean many different things to many different people. And some people, of course, are kind of turned off by gurus, because there's been some scandals connect with so-called gurus. And then the word has been overused, of course. People say, oh, he's a financial guru or whatever. So, but I'm talking about a spiritual type of guru. And I like this saying, guru means G-U-R-U. And to me, a guru, first of all, isn't limited by time or space or by a physical body. I believe and I have a guru who I've never met in a physical body. He passed on in 1969. Okay. So I believe a person could have a guru who maybe passed on 1,000 years ago or last year or whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a physical body and can be in a physical body. And really, the guru is not really outside of yourself. The guru is really within. And any, I think, true guru will say that. I'm within you. And so I also think to make a distinction between a guru and a teacher, because I think quite often people confuse the two. Like I've had many teachers in my life. We start out with our parents and our school teachers and on and on. Yeah. And I still have many teachers in my life. And say your wife or girlfriend could be your #1 teacher.
Oh yeah.
Pushing your buttons and everything. So we have many, many teachers. But I believe we just have one guru. And they're very different. And I think quite often people confuse the two and they think this person is their guru and they're really their teacher. So you have to be very, very discerning when it comes to a guru. And I really believe there's that famous saying, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. I believe that with the guru. When the disciple is ready, the guru will appear. And it may not appear in a physical body. And that's what happened to me.
Okay.
And I'll tell you the story about it. And I guess at first I wasn't ready for my guru because I first found out about him around 1969. in a psychedelic 60s poster shop. I was like this 11-year-old kid wandering around the shop looking at all these cool posters. And in the middle of this psychedelic poster shop is this big photo poster of my guru, Meher Baba. And he's this very friendly guy with bright eyes, smiling. I guess he was in his 50s then, this picture was at least. And 69 was the year he dropped his body, so he was much older. And so I look at this picture and I'm first like puzzled, what is this doing in here? You know, this isn't some psychedelic poster. And I look at it, and then I look down and see what it says underneath it. And underneath it, it says, would you buy a used car from this man? And I'm thinking like, you know, I'm an 11-year-old kid in a psychedelic poster shop, and I'm like, would I buy a used car for? I mean, what is this even doing here? Like, I was kind of confused. Like, and then I looked at him and I said, sure, why not? He looks like you could trust him. He's pretty honest. And then it took me, I guess, about 15 years later before I found out who he actually was. When I went into the room of my first meditation teacher, she had this big, beautiful meditation room, and she had this big, huge picture of him similar to that one. I recognized it immediately. And I said to her, who is he? Because I still remembered. And then she told me. But in my mind, just seeing his picture changed my life. And I wasn't conscious of it at the time. Because that year, 1969, was interesting, was the year he dropped his, what they say in India, they drop their body, you know, they pass on or whatever. Also, that year was a turning point in my life, because up to that point, I was getting into so much trouble. I was fighting all the time. Sometimes I was smoking and even drinking. I was hanging around these really bad kids. Because at that time, even though I lived in a suburb of New Jersey, it was a brand new suburb, so you got a lot of kids from the city moving there. And some of them weren't the best kids, you know. And I was hanging out with these kids and getting into a lot of fights, a lot of trouble. And then in elementary school, in gym class, that's when they taught us how to wrestle, very basic stuff. And I was pretty good at it. You know, I had been fighting a lot to begin with, you know, so I was good at wrestling right away. I didn't know what I was doing. And they had this, this is an interesting story, they had this championship for the elementary school, and I got to the finals. I was behind 4-0 going into the last period, and then in the last 30 seconds, somehow I turned him and pinned this guy, you know, and then everybody started clapping. I got my first trophy. So that got me really interested, because instead of getting punished and in trouble for fighting, you know, I got some positive
you get a trophy,
And then, you know, I got very involved in wrestling, and I won state championships, Eastern National Championships in high school, and took second in the nationals twice. And then our high school team, my senior year, was the best in the state and the best in the country. So we reached a very, very high level. So that was a really good experience for me to you know, reach a very high level in something through being focused and disciplined.
Achieve success, you know, like early on in life. I think it's a very good experience indeed. It gives you lots of motivation and drive and focus to do something which is worthy for yourself. Where you get recognition is great, isn't it?
And you know, I took that energy that was destructive and I put it into something.
You channeled it in something positive, right? That's the best way indeed.
So, so I was very, very involved with that for 12 years.
And then you started meditation, you said, and the first time you went to a meditation class, there the guru was.
Well, yeah, that was when I was about 27, right? But before that, I'll tell you a little bit what led up to that. So, you know, I was very involved with wrestling, but after a while I was getting a little burnt out because I was training so much and also psychologically. And I had this feeling in the back of my mind there was something more to life, but I didn't know what. I was agnostic. I wasn't religious. I wasn't an atheist. I was open to things, but I was very involved. My three main focuses in my life at that point was mainly wrestling, girls, and school, kind of in that order. Then my senior year, the last book I had to read for a philosophy class was The Tao of Physics by Frida Capra. And this is back in the early 80s, right? So I read this book, and it really started to open my mind about, you know, spiritual things that I'd never thought about before. And it really triggered something in me to like, wow, I was just so fascinated with this. And so at that point, I was done with my wrestling. I was going to graduate soon. And it suddenly opened up the whole nother world for me. And right after I read that book, I went down for a 2-week vacation down to the Jersey Shore and went to this place called Beach Haven. It's an island off New Jersey coast. And I spent some time there at a boarding house. And there was this guy staying there. He was maybe in his late 20s. And when I first met him at first, I kind of thought he was kind of a strange or a weirdo or whatever. Oh. And then, because he was very different, just everything about him. And then a person I know who was staying there, when I mentioned something about him, she said, oh, no, his name was Richard. He's a really interesting person. He's not a weirdo, but he's very interesting. He's interesting books and everything. And so later that night, it must have been about midnight, I was in the kitchen, and I was thinking about him. I was thinking, I'd really like to talk to him because I felt like I judged him superficially. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly he just like appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, and suddenly I see him, and he had these really piercing eyes. And we ended up talking for the next 4 hours straight about all these things I've never heard about or talked about much, such as reincarnation and karma. He had this book called The Mystical Teachings of Jesus Christ and all this. So I hung out with him for the next 2 weeks or so. So he was really psychic. I'd never been around anybody like that. And here I am opening up because of this book, the Tao of Physics on top of it. And so for 2 weeks I just hung out with him. He was an amazing person to hang out. And then one morning he says to me, can you take me to the highway? Because I had a car and he didn't. I said, yeah, why? He goes, I'm leaving. I go, you're leaving? Where are you going? He goes, I'm going to California. I go, how are you going to get there? He said, hitchhike. So I take him out to the highway. He gets out of the car. I go, to say goodbye to him. And he looks at me with these really piercing eyes. And he says, so what do you want to know? Like a Zen master, I said, and I started going with my mind what I wanted to know. And then he stopped. He goes, no. What do you really want to know? And I was like, whoa. And then I just said, I want to know the truth. I want to know what's really going on. Not what appears to be going on, but what's really what's the real truth behind this whole thing. And he just nodded his head and he said, that's right. And then he said to me, how are you going to find that out? I said, I have to find out through my own experience within myself. Mm-hmm. And he just said, that's right, see you later. And then I never saw him again.
And then when you started being a seeker in a more conscious way.
Yeah, that triggered it all, between that book and meeting him. And then it was about, I guess, 5 years later when I walked in to the meditation room of my first meditation teacher and finally found out who this person, Mayor Baba, was, because I didn't know. For 15 years, it was kind of in the back of my mind. So then I found out about him, and I read about his life, and I was like blown away by it. I was like, whoa, this person, like, I'll give you an example. I think he was around 30 years old. He was born in 1894 and passed on in 1969.
In India or in the US?
In India he was born, in Pune.
Yeah.
So around the age of, and he had this profound awakening when he was around 18 years old. And then around the age of 30, he said, I have not come to teach, but to awaken. And then he never said another word for the rest of his life.
Wow.
For another 44 years.
So people would just be in his presence and that's it, right?
He traveled all over the world when it was a difficult time, not easy to travel.
Yeah.
Met with thousands of people. Sometimes he'd have gatherings in India, sometimes as much as 100,000 people. And they'd come up to him and he'd give them their blessings or whatever. But people were just coming into his presence, his energy field would be transformed. And people who were around him a lot said they never felt like he wasn't talking. So then after I found out about him, I went down to his main center in the US at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Do you have a specific type of meditation you learned from his tradition? And is it more certain rituals? How did you sort of develop the knowledge of his teachings?
Well, one thing I want to make clear, even though I always felt a connection with him and always had that connection for 35 years, there were times I wasn't as focused on it as I am in the last 7 years. There have been times I got a little sidetracked and went through a lot of drama or whatever in life itself. But now, in this point in my life, it feels most deepest, right?
Okay.
And basically, the path with Mayor Baba is very within. He says he will work with you and guide you from within, and it will be different for everyone. Mm-hmm. There's one thing maybe you need to do and go through or whatever, and someone else the opposite, So it's not dogmatic at all. It's not like, these are the rules, you got to do this and that or whatever, If you go to the retreat centers, there's basic rules like, no drugs, no drinking, and no sex on the retreat centers, right?
Yeah.
But this is not like a monk type of path in that way. It's very much being in the world, but not of it or with it in that sense. So, and the close people around him, I met some of them when I went there in '89, and they were very down to earth, friendly, very loving people. They don't try to act and put on a facade they're saintly or anything like that. He was very much into being a grounded human being, and nobody wears special clothes or colors or anything like that. Okay. So there's nothing like that goes on. And for me, if you go to his main center in India, where his samadhi is, where his tomb is, you're kind of free to do what you want, and there's no schedule you have to follow. Now, twice a day, in the morning and evening, they do have an arti. Arti is a tradition in India. Sure. Usually it's connected with devotion to the guru or whatever. And so they do that twice a day up at his samadhi, lasts maybe a half hour or so, and there's some devotional singing and certain prayers connected with him. But if a person doesn't want to go to that, be involved with that, that's up to them, Okay. But I do my own arti connected with him twice a day.
That's your main practice.
Yeah, you could say that's my practice, and maybe you could say the real main practice of the bhakti practice and the practice with Meher Baba too is just remembering him, right? Like basically, you could say the bhakti path or the guru path is simple, but not easy. It's love, serve, remember, and surrender. Love, serve, remember, and surrender.
Yeah.
And Ram Dass and many others have spoken about that. When you're having a crisis and then, you're going to remember your problem or your guru. I remember one time when I was in India and I arrived at the New Delhi airport and I had a connecting flight to Pune. I was going to Meher Baba's center. I had no money on me. I had my debit card that I used before in India, no problem. I tried every single ATM in the airport. I couldn't get any money out.
That's such an Indian story.
I've never had this happen. I've been to India many times.
It kind of happened to me once or twice as well.
But no ATM would work, right? I'm about to get on my flight soon, and I have no money, and I'm in India, right? And so I was getting a little worried, to say the least. But then I caught myself. I said, okay, am I going to get all caught up and worried about this? It's not going to help, and I'm going to be a wreck by the time I get to Pune. Or am I going to remember Meher Baba, right? So I just silently repeated his name, mantra, it's just like they do it with Krishna and Ram, they repeat.
It's a very good explanation of something practical, So you have a moment of crisis and you could just react, overreact, or you can just center yourself, remembering the Guru indeed.
And every time I've done that, I swear, maybe not right away, but soon after, everything gets worked out, In that situation, by the time I got to Pune, I was perfectly at peace. I know somehow it was going to work out. I didn't know how. I get off the airplane. There's this Indian guy looked straight at me. He said, "Can I help you?"
I think for people that are not so familiar with Bhakti Yoga, there are different paths in yoga that are, suited for different people with different predispositions.
Sure,
okay.
Of course, yeah.
So you have the more famous Raja Yoga, where the asana practice, or the physical postures is there. Yes. But also you have something called Jnana Yoga, which is more like philosophical path, where you learn the scriptures and the Vedanta philosophy.
Who am I to inquire?
Etc. Yes. And then you have the Karma Yoga, which is more the yoga of action, or like, volunteering, helping others, serving, etc. The Bhakti Yoga, I personally associate with the Hare Krishna more, because I have experience spending time with them, both in South America and also in Manipur, where they stay in that near Calcutta. And the Bhakti is more the devotional type of yoga, is more from the heart, and it's about indeed, being loving, praying, chanting, music, singing, etc. It's more the devotional side of yoga. And it's a fascinating path, particularly if you're predisposed to it from the heart. And of course, it's not so famous in the West. I think most people think of yoga as the physical aspect, which is the Hatha Yoga, which is part of Raja Yoga, which is this other system of yoga. Right? They're all kind of connected. They all come from India, obviously.
Right.
But it's fascinating, and exactly what you're saying, having this very powerful presence of a guru that was an extraordinary human being, no matter what you might think of gurus or him in particular, but this person, of course, is so charismatic and so magnetic that so many people want to spend time in his presence, right? And people, you say, they perceive miracles happening within themselves. That is the living proof that this person is not an ordinary kind of person.
But people have to remember, he is who you are. It's not he's some, and you aren't. He is who you really are. Mm-hmm. It's your true divine self, but you just are ignorant of it, delusion, you know.
Like a mirror, yeah.
So that is your true self, because ultimately it's all one, right? Mm-hmm. So he is that one self that you are, and we all are, ultimately. He's a reflection of that. He's an incarnation of whatever of that. So in one sense, yes, you honor and devote it to that being, but that being, and in a way, I feel I'm lucky in a sense, or not lucky, but it's almost better that he's not in the physical body, because I have to connect with him within myself. Yeah. He's not, you know, it's so easy if that guru's in the physical body, if you focus so much on the physical body and feeling separate from it or whatever. And some people say, who were with Meher Baba physically, after he passed on, they felt him even more, mm-hmm. because they really felt him within their heart, their soul. But I believe, like all the yogas can be really one yoga, in the sense of, like, bhakti yoga is love, that's the bhakti path, right? Serve is the karma yoga. Love, serve, remember is knowledge, wisdom, self-inquiry, who am I, right? And surrender, you know, that's, you know, everything. So I don't, for me, with my path I follow, even though it's bhakti, I feel I'm involved with all of them. And I do some yoga on my own, some hatha yoga.
And the destination is the same.
Right.
I mean, that's when you leave the thought, the mind, the body behind, and you get into a state of samadhi, or like deep connection with the universe.
Right, right.
And that's what Sattva Yoga path ultimately tells people, you know, you can achieve through yoga.
And also, Meher Baba, and I consider myself, Meher Baba was considered what you would call a universal guru, right? Mm-hmm. He's not of one religion. He's of all religions and no religions, you know. And for me too, when people ask me, I just universal. If they ask me, I'm Christian or Buddhist or whatever, I'm universal. I don't consider myself of one religion. I'm like of all religions and no religion. Yeah.
And it's very important, I think, if somebody at home is looking to start on some sort of, you know, spiritual journey, or they have a strong attraction to, you know, maybe they had a discovery of the soul, because, you know, everybody has it, but then you kind of have to find out that you have it. Because my personal experience, that for many years I was kind of more in material world like everybody else, yeah. And I was very mind and body driven, right? And I had to go through some sort of awakening in order to start feeling the emotions of the soul, which is a beautiful thing. But yeah, depending on you know, your path and what life leads you to do, Bhakti Yoga is also something that you want to try and experience. But then, as you said, you know, it's not you don't really choose your guru. It just kind of happens to you in a way or another, right? So if you are a seeker of sort, as in if you think there is more to life than just the you know, the day to day and the mind and the body, and you have this yearning for more, if you seek, then you're gonna find. Is that right?
Yeah, and sometimes, of course, there's a thing they call effort and grace. You have to make the effort, then there's grace, right? There's actually a book written about Meher Baba's effort and grace by one of his close devotees. But anyhow, but the thing is, it's sort of like when you lose your keys or you lose anything, right? Yeah, like how often do you lose something? You're looking all over, you can't find it, you give up, and then you find it, right? Yeah. So you have to make effort, but not too much. Like if you look too much, it's right in front of you, it's right within you, right? It's like, so you have to make effort, but then you have to surrender to grace and let go. So it's a tricky thing, you know, because if you try too much, that can do more harm than good.
Oh yeah, you go into the spiritual treadmill, so to speak, you know, doing practices all the time, going from workshop to another.
Right, right.
And then whatever you do, you know, ultimately is what's happening, and you just, you know, you go with the flow. Right. But then ultimately, I also agree with you. You get to a point where, and you know, many people describe it as a spiritual awakening of sort, as in there is a moment in life where something happens which is distinct. I mean, that's what happened to me.
Yeah, sure.
But it doesn't have to be that way,
no,
right?
It can be gradual.
It can be gradual and organic as well, right?
And also, it can happen because of extreme suffering. Like, for example, you know, quite often it is. That brings us to wanting to live or be in another way. Like Eckhart Tolle was suicidal before he had his awakening, right? So quite often, not always, suffering can bring us to that Buddha. That's what happened to the Buddha, right? He was very dukkha. He was very dissatisfied, and through suffering, he left everything.
Because that's when you start seeking more deeply, is when you're not happy. If you're comfortable, life is okay, you just go along.
Comfortably numb,
dinner.
right?
Yeah.
Like Pink Floyd's song.
I say if something really happens, so you're really experiencing pain, and that's when you say, oh my goodness, I need to sort myself out. I need something more. What's going on? You try to make sense of life in a different way, and then maybe you're more open to it.
We always have our ups and downs in life. We always, there's times very joyful, and other times we suffer. It's part of life, right? Yeah. But I'll tell you, I find when I've had suffering and gone deeply into it, and it almost seems like sometimes it's too much. When I surrender it to my guru, it's amazing how grace, like, almost it lifts it. It's just this, and also it doesn't even have to be the guru. If we just surrender our suffering to the universe or whatever, because so often we hold on to it for whatever reason.
Trying to control.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's many, it's what we're used to or whatever. And there's a thing which Mayor Baba talked about, a big difference between necessary suffering and unnecessary suffering. And, but it's suffering. It doesn't matter ultimately whether it's necessary or not. But but I just want to also say, like, when I first had my first conscious spiritual experience, I was 19 years old. This was before my whole thing with Mayor Baba as my guru. And I was actually on a national U.S. wrestling team. We were in Iran. We were one of the last sports teams to go to Iran before the Islamic Revolution happened. It was like the summer before it all happened. And they took us on a day trip to these ancient temples, and there happened to be a samadhi of some great, I think it was a Sufi master or whatever, but I wasn't into any of that stuff. I just thought it was an old temple or whatever. So we go to the samadhi, this tomb of this very high being, and we go there, and suddenly I'm feeling like this incredible energy, right? Like I'm like standing like, what's going on? I've never felt anything like this. And what's causing this? What is it? It was really strong, and it kind of blew me away. And then finally, I was puzzled, like, what is this? I didn't know. And then finally, I guess whatever it was, like 10 years later, when I went to Mayor Baba's samadhi and I felt this similar energy, then I realized,
you connected it to.
It was the energy of this being, so that was the first time I had some type of what I would call
a spiritual experience.
Yeah, energy or whatever.
But ultimately, maybe, do you believe that some people are more predisposed than others? I kind of got this feeling that some people just earlier on in life, they tend to have more these spiritual experiences, while some people really never have them.
Well, I think, some people are more open, more sensitive, the way they're brought up. Sometimes it seems to be connected with, you have a mother or grandfather or grandmother who is psychic or whatever. It gets kind of genetically almost passed on. So I think there's something like that possibly going on. And then, of course, if you believe in karma and reincarnation or whatever, then there's connections with that. So my belief is we don't meet anybody in our life by accident. We don't have a connection with any. There's always cause and effect in everything. It's karma or whatever.
Determinism,
So,
in the Western philosophy.
Yeah, in physics, for every action is equal to opposite reaction. Matter is neither created or destroyed, just changes form. And you can take that and transfer it over to spirituality in a lot of ways, which is what they did in that book, The Tao of Physics. So I just don't believe in any accidents in life. And even miracles is just something we don't know what caused that. But it seems like a miracle. We just don't know what. Everything has a cause and an effect.
Thomas, I met you the first time in stance meditation.
Yeah, stand.
And of course, you are a person with a very deep understanding of, the Bhakti path and many other things. It's very always fascinating having a chat with you about philosophy and different things. I want to talk about Koh Phangan. I mean, there are many places you can be based in, and you decided to come and live here.
I've only been living on this island since last summer. Before that, for 2 years, I was living on Koh Samui. I much prefer Koh Phangan. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Koh Samui, but it doesn't compare to Koh Phangan. It's much more nature here. It's much more down to earth, natural. There's a special energy here. That's why there's all these yoga and healing centers and people involved with this. There's definitely there's some type of vortex or energy here, and there's a lot of these crystals you see everywhere. So it's a special, very special place. So I really love Koh Phangan, and there's wonderful people and all these young people exploring and everything. And it's a great place with some wonderful people and very down-to-earth people. But actually, I kind of have two homes. I have a home up north in Buriram because I have a Thai wife and we have a 2-year-old daughter. And I feel her conception was also connected with my guru.
Thomas, thanks a lot for being part of this podcast today. So very nice getting to know you a little bit more, okay?
Well, thank you for making it happen. Namaste.
Thank you.
Yeah.